When I first moved to Atlanta, I was driving a 15-year-old aqua green Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme with over 300,000 miles on it. Now, where I come from, they call this kind of car a hooptie. So for all of you who are not from the hood, let me explain. A hooptie is an old car. It's a junker. It's a beater. It's one of them cars you just determined to drive until the wheels fall off. Well, my car's name was Miss Bessie. Now, you know if you ever had a hooptie, you got to give it a name. I wrote a speech about my car. That speech was called Miss Bessie the Hooptie. In that speech, I talked about how every time I drove this car, tow trucks would be circling around me like vultures. This car burned more oil than a deep fryer at Church's Chicken. I no longer had a car note, but repairs were running me $450 a month. I entered that Miss Bessie the Hooptie speech into a speech contest, and that year I won first place in the Toastmasters Humorous Speech Contest for the state of Georgia. Now, I tell you that story because it's the perfect example of what I've come to call finding the funny. I do a lot of public speaking. Over the past 25 years or so, between giving sales presentations, doing training sessions, speaking in Toastmasters, I've probably spoken over 1,000 times in public. Out of all the things that I love to do when it comes to public speaking, I love to tell humorous stories and to give humorous speeches. In 2010, I wrote a book called Finding the Funny. That book was a compilation of a lot of the humorous speeches that I had done up to that point. So after winning the contest and writing the book, people have asked me to come out and give workshops and seminars teaching people how to develop humor in public speaking. I call this philosophy or this body of knowledge finding the funny. So what is finding the funny, and how can you use it to help you as a public speaker? Finding the funny, first of all, is a mindset. Finding the funny is looking at the world through humor-colored glasses. It's about taking all the things that happen to you on a daily basis and trying to find the humor in them. Let's face it, if you have to speak in public, if you have to go out and give presentations for work, you need to have a little humor in your presentations. When you learn to develop a finding the funny mindset, you're able to take those things that happen to you on a daily basis, and you're able to develop humorous stories and vignettes that you can incorporate into your speeches so that you could be a more entertaining speaker. Speakers love to tell jokes, and audiences love to tell jokes and hear speakers be funny. When you can add humor to your presentation, it lets your audiences loosen up, and it helps you become more entertaining and likable as a speaker. So, what can you do to find the funny? First of all, I'm going to give you a few examples of how I was able to find the funny. So I'm having Sunday morning with my wife. We're sitting there at the breakfast table, and we're looking out our back window, having Sunday breakfast. And my wife says to me, we should get a bird feeder. I said, okay, no problem. Like a good husband, I march off to the hardware store. I get a bird feeder. I bring it back. I hang it up on the deck. No problem, right? Wrong. That's when I discovered that in addition to attracting birds, bird feeders attract squirrels. I had just purchased a squirrel magnet. That one suggestion that my wife gave me of purchasing a bird feeder started a whole series of events. It was a battle royale. Oh, it was on. It was between Al versus the squirrels. And I was determined not to let a rodent with a brain the size of a peanut outsmart me. I was determined to find a squirrel-proof bird feeder. I got online. I started Googling high-tech bird feeders. I'm looking up bird feeders with names like Super Stop a Squirrel, Stump a Squirrel, Squirrel Be Gone. It got so bad, my wife walked in the house one day and saw me laying on the floor with a BB gun aimed out the window. She said, "What in the world are you doing?" I said, "I got to keep those squirrels away from the bird feeder." Totally obsessed, right? So I wrote a speech called Squirrels at the Bird Feeder, and it became one of the leading chapters of my book. Let me give you another example of how I find it funny. So I'm sitting on my sofa one day, I'm channel surfing, I'm watching TV, and all of a sudden I can't get the remote to work. So my first thought in my mind was, oh man, I got to get up and walk all the way over there and change the channel. That's when it dawned on me. We're so spoiled by our technology that it's actually making us lazy. I wrote a speech called "Is Technology Making Us Lazy?" where I made a direct comparison of all of the gizmos and gadgets and high-tech things that we have in our life and how we get a little soft around the middle. I even developed a name for this phenomenon. I call it Techno Lazy. Just think about it. We don't have to wash dishes anymore. We don't have to open doors. We don't have to walk upstairs. I just use the restroom at the break. I didn't have to turn the water on. I didn't even have to flush the toilet. All of these gizmos and gadgets are making our lives so much easier for us. Techno lazy. Another way to find the funny is to make fun of yourself. Audiences love it when you can use a little self-deprecating humor and make yourself the butt of a joke. So what you want to do is you want to find all of the weird and crazy little wacky things that you do, and you want to learn. I know y'all got them, right? Everybody's got them. Everybody got all of our little weird quirks in that. Take a look at those things and put them down. Make a list of those things and be willing to talk about those things in your speeches. For example, you could talk about where you're from. Now, I happen to be from Detroit, Michigan, born and raised. I grew up with kids named Rocky, Bunky, and Oogie. And these were the girls. I wrote a speech called My Pet Peeves, Idiosyncrasies, and Quirks, where I talked about all of my little quirks. I talked about how I'm a neat freak, how I'm organized, how I'm a germaphobe, and how I'm faithful and loyal, just like a dog. My wife threw that last one in. So once you start developing this finding the funny mindset, you develop the ability to see your life almost like a sitcom. And you walk around and you start finding the funny in everything that happened to you. Let me give you a little formula on how you can use finding the funny to develop it into speeches and humor when you have to give presentations. I call this formula OCDD. It's observe, capture, develop, and deliver. First of all, you got to observe. Humor is around us everywhere. You just got to learn to see it. So always be on the lookout for humor in your life. Everywhere you go, things happen to you, but just don't notice the humor in them. Once you start developing a finding the funny mindset, you'll learn to see the humor in everything. So always observe. The second is you got to start capturing these events. Now, because I'm a humorist and because I have a finding the funny mindset, I have a notebook that I carry with me all the time. Even when we go on road trips, I give my wife the notebook. She's writing. I say, honey, write this down. Right? I'm thinking of ideas. So over the years, I've accumulated this shoebox full of notebooks just with all of these little ideas that I capture on them. Now, some of you are saying, notebooks, man, that's old school. So if notebooks are too old school, there's probably an app for that, right? So you got to capture all of these ideas. So once you capture these ideas, what I've started doing recently is I've even started taking pictures of funny things that I see. I was sitting at a light the other day, and I looked, and the guy next to me had a landscaping truck. The name of his landscaping business, emblazoned in a big logo on the side of his truck, was The Weed Man. How many times a day does this guy get stopped by the police, right? I envisioned there was two guys sitting in the truck. They look just like Cheech and Chong, right? They roll the window down, smoke come out. I don't know. So you got to start capturing these ideas. Capture them, write them down, put them on the voice control and that. And then next you have to start developing your ideas. Once you start building up all these ideas and that, and then you can sit down with your ideas, work with them, embellish them. If nothing occurs to you that's funny about it at the time, Google the idea with the word humor, just to get some ideas flowing. So you got to play with these ideas. All it takes is a little creative imagination and a healthy dose of embellishment. Okay? So always great. And then next is deliver. Work on your delivery. What you want to do is you want to find a good Toastmasters club or a good public speaking venue where you can stand up and you can practice these ideas so that you can get some humor and you can get some feedback. So that's how you develop the finding the funny mindset. I witnessed something recently that I think is a perfect example of using the power of humor in public speaking. 2 weeks ago, I watched the Toastmasters International 2019 World Championship of Public Speaking. This was broadcast live from the annual convention in Denver, Colorado. Now, this is by any stretch of the imagination the largest speech contest in the world, with over 30,000 participants from over 140 countries. At this stage, there were 6 finalists who had made it to the world stage. Now, these 6 finalists had to give a significantly original 5 to 7 minute speech. And keep in mind, this contest is international, so these speeches had to be universal enough to appeal to the international audience. 6 finalists had made it to the world stage. As they began to speak, I started to count the laughs that each number of speakers received. I found it very interesting that the first place winner also had the most laughs at 26. The second place winner had the second highest laugh count at 25. The third place winner had the third highest laugh count at 20 laughs. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a powerful example of using humor in public speaking. What I hope I've shared with you today is developing a finding the funny mindset. Here's the most important thing of what I'm sharing with you today. If you develop a finding the funny mindset, it not only helps you as a speaker when you're giving presentations, but it will also help you in your personal life. I could count the times on one hand that I have a bad day every year because I've learned to see the humor in life. When you develop a finding the funny mindset, you bypass all of the negativity and all of the divisiveness because you will always find something to smile about. Finding the funny is an idea worth spreading. This one simple change in mindset has the ability to change your entire outlook on life. And not only will it make you a better speaker, I hope that every single one of you will develop a finding the funny mindset so that you can wake up every day and you can put on those humor-colored glasses and find the funny in your life. Thank you.